Hey up, it's Steve from that old Yorkshire geek, and it's list time again. More Star Trek lists, this time from the Digital Fix, usually from Screen Rant, places like that, aren't they? What Trek culture, whatever the hell they call it. This time it's from the Digital Fix. Don't forget, before we start, like and subscribe, share the videos, drop a comment, hit the notification bell if you're subscribed already. I'm also on Rumble and Spotify and Amazon Music Podcasts and Google Podcasts. This video will be exclusive to Patreon for a couple of weeks, and then I'll pop it up on YouTube and the other places, maybe. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Links in the description for all that, as are the links for my 2 books. I haven't plugged these for a while. Silent Predator, short horror novella about big cats eating people in North Yorkshire. And Mercury Rapids, a light-hearted sci-fi action adventure about UFOs and stuff like that. Right, let's get on with this list, shall we? This list is... There we go. Star Trek's USS Enterprise, every version of the Starship explained, from Kirk's adventures to Horizons New. With 7 of 9, the USS Enterprise has a long story. The best Star Trek starship. We've compiled its timeline below, and off the bat, they've missed one out. They don't even mention it. So we'll start from the very beginning, because it is canon. It has appeared on screen, not in its actuality. But in images it's appeared on screen, and it's this one. The USS Enterprise XCV-330, the famous ring ship, which you can see there. We've got another image there. There we go. Not a very good picture, is it? But that one. Any others? That's a better one, isn't it? There we go. There's the ring ship. The USS Enterprise XCV, I forgot already, 330. Right, so we'll have a read of that. How do I get rid of this now? There we go. Right, the USS Enterprise XCV-330 was an Earth spacecraft that was in service prior to 2143, so it was before the NX-01. A painting of this ship and the mission patch appeared on the wall of the 602 Club on Earth in 2143, from Enterprise's episode First Flight. A similar painting was on display on a wall in Admiral Maxwell Forrest's office on Earth in 2154, Enterprise Home. This Enterprise was honoured with an illustration on the USS Enterprise's recreation deck after its refit in the early 2270s Star Trek The Motion Picture, which is where we first saw this, I think. And it went on to be the inspiration for the Vulcan ships, didn't it? The Surat class ships, I do believe. But there we go. And there, the image, that's from Star Trek Into Darkness, isn't it? But that's an alternate universe, isn't it? But technically it wasn't an alternate universe when that came out, because the universe changed, with the USS Kelvin thing, didn't it? Or did it? I have no idea. Star Trek timelines and continuity is all over the place these days. But there we go, so that's the first one, the very first one. You may, some people count the Space Shuttle Enterprise, don't they? There's the first spaceship, which it technically was, but it didn't have to go into space. so you can't really count that one. It was just a test, wasn't it? Which is a shame. It'd be nice if the first one that went into orbit was the Enterprise, but that was the Columbia, so anyway. Right, so let's go back to this article now. Right, the history and timeline of Star Trek's USS Enterprise explained. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. You know the rest. Since it began in 1966, Star Trek has been tracking the adventures of the USS Enterprise right the way through the Star Trek timeline. Some spin-off Star Trek series like DS9, Voyager, Discovery and Lower Decks have directed their focus elsewhere on other ships or stations. But the USS Enterprise is still synonymous with the franchise. The USS Enterprise is undoubtedly the best Star Trek starship to ever grace our screens in its various forms. And the beauty of it is whether you're still in love with Kirk's original ship, or if you have a soft spot for Picard's Enterprise D. The USS Enterprise's long history has something for everyone. We're now onto the Enterprise G. Introduced in the recent Star Trek Picard Season 3, and it can be hard to keep track of the evolution of Starfleet's flagship. It didn't used to be Starfleet's flagship, but for some reason it became the flagship in Strange New Worlds, but it wasn't the flagship in the original series. As I said, they've no idea of them. And I like Strange New Worlds. Anyway, no longer Here's the complete timeline of Star Trek's USS Enterprise, showing its aesthetic evolution, important dates and captains. And as I said, I got it wrong off the back. The first one was that one. I don't even know. Was it a warp ship? Could it travel at warp? Because I can't see any nacelles or anything. Do we know anything about it? Let's have a look. Before we go on, I'm just read. I'm not going to read all this out. I'm just going to see if it was warp capable. It doesn't really say, does it? It doesn't really say. I'm guessing it was 2143. It must have been. Oh, there we go. There we go. The Enterprise. Right. Okay. It says here. The Enterprise was launched sometime before 2143, and if it was equipped with warp drive, it was presumably limited to warp factor 2, as the episode documents the first Earth ships to surpass warp 2. So there we go. So it could have had a warp drive, but there's no nacelles or anything, is there, that I can see, unless they're hidden away somewhere, which I suppose is reasonable for a warp 2 ship. Right. Anyway, back to the Enterprise, the other Enterprises. Here we go. The Enterprise NX-01, active between 2151 and 2161. Its captain was Jonathan Archer, and it's called the NX class. I've never liked that. I love the NX class. I love the Enterprise from Enterprise. But I don't like they just called it the NX class. It's like unimaginative, isn't it? They should have called it so. It should have been the Enterprise class. So it was the first one. Anyway, the first Starship Enterprise, and the only version not to bear the prefix USS, which is a shame. It was just called Enterprise, wasn't it? Which is a shame. It should have been the USS. I know it. USS stands for United Spaceship or United Starship, doesn't it? But as in the Federation. But it could have been from United Earth, couldn't it? United States ship, as in the United Earth, not necessarily the United States. Anyway, the beautiful NX-01 established United Earth as an interplanetary power to be taken seriously, exploring the Alpha and Beta quadrants and paving the way for the creation of the Federation. Led by Captain Jonathan Archer and manned by a small and specialised crew, I think it had about 83 or something like that crew, wasn't it? The Enterprise was vital in beginning diplomatic relations with the Tellarites, Andorians, Klingons and more. The ship's mission also included the search for the Xindi, who posed a great threat to Earth, with the great Season 3 of Enterprise. After the ship was finally recalled, its crew members were hailed as legendary heroes, except for Trip. Well, he was a hero, but, he died, didn't he? But he didn't. He didn't die. It were all a holographic recreation, and it were a bad one, which is the truth. Right, we're moving on. NCC 1701, but they're showing the wrong one, aren't they? They're showing the refit. But anyway, no doubt they'll mention it. They could have shown the original one and then the refit, couldn't they? Digital fix, you're rubbish. Right, USS Enterprise NCC 1701, active between 2245 and 2285. Captains Robert April, Christopher Pike, James T. Kirk, Will Decker, and Captain Spock. No, never mind. Constitution class and Constitution 2 class refit. Oh, so they're lumping them together. The pioneering adventures of the USS Enterprise began under the command of Captain Robert April, with its launch in 2245. After April accepted a promotion to the rank of Admiral, he transferred command to Christopher Pike, who led the ship on exploratory and diplomatic missions across the galaxy. By the way, it's odd, isn't it, that they say it was launched in 2245, and I think that is technically canon. But in Star Trek 3, we're told that, which was set in 2285, we're told that the Enterprise were 20 years old. So that means 2265. So, what's the truth? Anyway, after over a decade in the captain's chair, Pike stepped aside. James T. Kirk transferred from the USS Farragut in order to take command of the flagship alongside his first officer Spock. They led the crew on a 5-year mission of exploration, during which Kirk made contact with a record number of alien species. And it was supposedly 12 Constitution classes, weren't there? But we've learned that there are probably more than that now. As I said, they can't keep the canon and timeline straight, can they, these days? But I'm sure it says in the Star Trek the Motion Picture novelisation, I'm sure I've seen it somewhere, I've read it somewhere, that the Enterprise was the only starship that returned to Earth after its 5-year mission, relatively intact. That's how it was put, relatively intact. So all the others must have either been destroyed or got bashed up or whatever. But which is why Kirk, were made an admiral. But then we've learned that the Enterprise went on several 5-year missions. Pike took it on a 5-year mission, because he says it at the beginning of Strange New Worlds, doesn't he? But anyway. Following on from the success of his period as a captain, Kirk was promoted and chose Will Decker as his successor, the son of Matt Decker, who was the Commodore Matt Decker, who was the commanding officer of the USS Constellation, which was destroyed by the Planet Killer. Along with Scotty, who remained the ship's chief engineer, Decker oversaw a huge refit of the USS Enterprise, which was completed as the V'Ger incident began. After V'Ger, Spock assumed command of the USS Enterprise as its captain, and the ship became a training vessel for cadets. Kirk stepped into the chair once again during the battle with Khan, and took the USS Enterprise back to dry dock after Spock's death. As the ship was being repaired, Kirk stole the USS Enterprise with the help of his crew, the main crew, the ensemble crew, in order to resurrect Spock, but during this mission, the USS Enterprise was destroyed in a confrontation with the Klingon Krug. They didn't go to resurrect Spock, they went to basically get his body back, didn't they? Or try and get his Catra from the Genesis planet. They didn't know he'd been revived. Right, NCC Enterprise, NCC 1701A. Right, so let's see what they say about this one. Active between 2286 and 2293, Captain James T. Kirk in command. Remember, he was demoted from Admiral to Captain at the end of Star Trek 4, Constitution 2 class. In brackets, refit, I suppose you could say. Following on from the destruction of the Enterprise and the demotion of Admiral Kirk, a new Enterprise was constructed for the now Captain to command. I don't know, that's up in the air, isn't it? Some say it was a new ship, because Scotty says it's a new ship, doesn't he, in Star Trek 5, and not a very well-built ship, apparently. But some have suggested it was actually the USS Yorktown, which we didn't see it, but we saw its captain in Star Trek 4. It got disabled by the whale probe, and some have suggested that were renamed the Enterprise and given the A suffix. Anyway, the Enterprise A had a short service history with only 7 years' worth of missions. These included the journey to Shakari and, most importantly, its final mission to negotiate peace with Klingon Chancellor Gorkon. After internal sabotage, the USS Enterprise A became embroiled in a plot to wreck the peace process, though played a vital role in the eventual signing of the Khitomer Accords prior to being decommissioned. So there we go. Yeah, so at the end of Star Trek 6, they went off to be decommissioned, didn't they? But not straight away, because Spock said they had orders to return to Earth to be decommissioned, and Spock said, I believe I would tell them to go to hell. So I think Kirk probably went the long way round to get back to Earth. Right, USS Enterprise NCC 1701B, active between 2293 and an unknown time. Captain John Harriman was the only one we know about, and it was Excelsior class, but it was like an Excelsior refit. It had some differences between, or an Excelsior variant. It had some differences with what we've seen with the USS Excelsior, notably this area, this section here, near the main deflector. Anyway, only a year after the Enterprise A was decommissioned, the Enterprise B was launched before technical work had been completed. Everything was due to be installed on Tuesday, the upcoming Tuesday, with Captain John Harriman leading the new ship. Its early launch was primarily for the sake of publicity. However, the ship was quickly drawn into an energy distortion field called the Nexus while responding to an emergency distress call. there were two ships, one that I forgot what they call them now. I forgot what they called them, but they had refugees. I forgot the bloody name. Guinan were on, and Dr. Soren. Anyway, this led to massive. What do they call them now? Those what is Guinan? Elorian. There we go. I got there in the end. Elorian refugees. Presumably they were refugees from the Borg, because remember the Borg destroyed the Elorian homeworld. So we're presuming they were refugees from the Borg. Anyway, not that the Federation knew about the Borg at that time, or did they? Who knows? As I said, it's all up in the air. We supposedly first encountered the Borg on the Enterprise D, didn't we, in the episode... what do we call that now? Q-Who. That episode. And but if that were the case, how did the Hansons on the aboard the Raven, the SS Raven, how did they know about the Borg, which were long before then? I don't know. And remember, they'd encountered the Borg. The Enterprise NX-01 had encountered the Borg, but they didn't know that they were Borg at the time. Like 100 years earlier, hasn't it? Anyway. Right, anyway, so back to the Enterprise B and the Nexus. Right, this led to massive damage on the ship and the presumed death of James T. Kirk, who was aboard the Enterprise B for its launch. The history of Harriman's command and of the ship following on from the Nexus incident is largely unknown to us. But I'm sure it did lots of cool things. But yes, as we know, Kirk, his body was killed, but he essentially ended up in the Nexus, didn't he? Which were like a timeless place. As Guinan said, it was like wrapping yourself up in joy. You just relived the happiest day of your life over and over again, essentially. Right, Enterprise, NCC 1701C. This is Ambassador class. There it is. From the episode Yesterday's Enterprise. I think that's the only time we saw it. Active between, we don't know, and 2344. Captains Rachel Garrett, class Ambassador class. You'd think Star Trek I'd do like backstories for these ships, wouldn't you? So they could at least have a launch date for them. Anyway, the USS Enterprise C is one of the most significant ships in Starfleet history. Not only is it the first version of the Enterprise to be permanently captained by a woman, Rachel Garrett, one of the best Star Trek captains, apparently, it's also the ship which prevented the outbreak of a new Federation Klingon war through brave self-sacrifice. While responding to a distress call from the Klingon outpost Narendra 3, which was under attack by Romulans, even though the Romulans were supposed to be like in a self-imposed exile at that time, as I said, the Star Trek contradicts itself a lot. The Enterprise C was sucked into a temporal rift which brought it into the future. However, in this future, the Klingons and Federation were locked in a desperate and bloody battle which had claimed 40 billion lives. To prevent the war and correct the timeline, the Enterprise C was sent back through the temporal rift. It sacrificed itself at Narendra 3, defending the outpost against Romulan aggressors, which the Klingons saw as a pivotal act of bravery. The ship was completely destroyed, however, along with its crew. But no, the ship might have been destroyed, but its crew wasn't destroyed, was it? Because we learned that, some escaped, probably in escape pods. The Romulans got them, picked them up, took them back to Romulus as prisoners of war, didn't they? Including Tasha Yar, who would shack up with a Romulan officer and birth Sealer, the wicked half-Romulan, half-human Sealer. Anyway, here we go. Enterprise NCC 1701D, my personal favourite. I love the Enterprise D. I like all the Enterprises, but Enterprise D gives me warm, fuzzy feelings. Anyway, active between 2363 to 2371 and 2401, which, technically wasn't the Enterprise D, it was just called that, but never mind. Captains Jean-Luc Picard and Edward Jellicoe, Galaxy class. 20 years after the sacrifice of the Enterprise C, the Galaxy-class Enterprise D was launched as Starfleet's flagship. But I don't think it was. It wasn't launched as Starfleet's flagship. I'm sure the Yamato, I'm sure that was the flagship before the Enterprise D. I'm sure it was. I'm sure they've said that at some point in the in Next Generation. Anyway, the ship was under the command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard for the vast majority of its service history, barring a brief period of command by Captain Jellicoe during Picard's mission to Celtris 3. Don't forget, it was under the command of Captain William Riker as well during Best of Both Worlds. He was made a captain, field promotion to captain. Anyway, during which time first contact was made with numerous powerful alien species, including the Q Continuum, the Borg, and the Cytherians. Decades after that, though, the episode that the Cytherians in the episode is it Conundrum? The one where the go to the, or is that the one the or is that the Cytherians the one with Reg Barclay, the nth degree? I think it's that one, isn't it? Where he gets his brain improved and he sends the Enterprise, a long way, doesn't it? I think that's the Cytherians. Anyway, decades after its destruction, the Enterprise was rebuilt by Geordie LaForge at Starfleet Museum, at Hatton Prime or whatever. And in 2401, the reconstructed ship was vital in the final battle with the Borg. The saucer section had been retrieved from Veridian 3, Vorstoja Veridian. What was I saying? The saucer section was retrieved from Veridian 3, and the drive section, the secondary hull, whatever you want to call it, which were obviously destroyed at Veridian 3 by the Duras sisters, was from the USS Syracuse, apparently. So I don't know why the USS Syracuse didn't have a saucer section. Maybe they hadn't built it. Anyway, right, USS Enterprise NCC 1701E, active between 2372 and unconfirmed, but it could be that it was essentially decommissioned in the Star Trek Prodigy episodes, but I can't remember when that's supposed to be taking place. I'm sure it's 2380s. I'm not entirely sure. But I think the Enterprise E was in that battle when all the Federation ships started firing on each other in that battle with the which I can't remember what it was called, the alien device that were on the Protostar that caused it was like an AI, wasn't it, that caused all the Federation ships to fire on each other. Anyway, whatever. Captain Jean-Luc Picard was assigned command of the USS Enterprise E, a state-of-the-art Sovereign-class ship, after the destruction of the D. The Enterprise E led many significant missions. By the way, I forgot Captains Jean-Luc Picard and Worf, son of Moog. Sovereign class. The Enterprise E led many significant missions, with the time travel to Earth's past to prevent interference from the Borg being arguably the most pivotal. And some could argue that incident permanently changed the Star Trek timeline. It could be argued that. That made it different to what we saw in the original series, for instance. And, the Next Generation. Anyway. In Star Trek Picard Season 3, it's confirmed that Worf was promoted to the rank of Captain and took command of the USS Enterprise E at some point after Picard became an Admiral in 2381. However, Worf was also blamed for the ship's destruction, indicating that the USS Enterprise E's service history came to an end under his command at an unspecified date. But he did say, "That was not my fault." Anyway, Enterprise F, USS Enterprise NCC 1701F, active between unconfirmed and 2401. Captains Elizabeth Shelby. Well, she was an Admiral, wasn't she? Odyssey class. Right, so this one was actually first introduced in Star Trek Online. It was basically a competition, wasn't it? They had a competition for fans to design the next Enterprise, and this one won with its twin necks. And let's say it's a pretty cool ship. Cool looking ship. The service history of the USS Enterprise F, an Odyssey class ship, remains the most ambiguous to date. The ship is only seen just before it is decommissioned in Picard Season 3 under the command of Fleet Admiral Shelby prior to the Borg attack on Sol Station. This attack led to the death of Shelby. No, it didn't. Terry Metalis has said Shelby's still alive, even though we saw her get shot twice at point blank range. But we're told that she's still alive by Terry Matowers. Oh, excuse me. And the F was decommissioned as planned in 2401. We don't know why it was decommissioned. It seemed fine. Was there another Enterprise lined up? Obviously not, because of what happened next. This is the thing. I liked Star Trek Picard Season 3, but this is my big problem with it at the end. Right, here we go. USS Enterprise NCC 1701G. There we go. 2402 to whenever. Captain 7 of 9 / Annika Hansen. Neo Constitution class, or sometimes called Constitution 3 class. In 2402, the USS Titan A was rechristened as the Enterprise G, and command was handed to the newly promoted 7 of 9. Previously, while still the Titan, the ship had been commanded by Captain Liam Shaw. Is that all they've got to... Oh, no, it didn't. Right. And that's all they've got to say about it. It was instrumental in that battle at Earth against the Borg, when the Borg tried taking over Starfleet, and essentially did. All the officers under 25 became Borg, but it was sorted out by the Titan A at the time. Basically ran interference essentially, while the Enterprise D dealt with the Borg Queen and all that jazz at Jupiter. But yes, I don't like that the Titan A, the name of the Titan A is basically gone now, and it's just been given to the Enterprise G. They should have made a new Enterprise. If they were decommissioning the Enterprise F, a new Enterprise should have been on the way. And because there was a passage of time after the victory at the end of Picard Season 3, it did say 1 year later. So then they could have brought out a new Enterprise, a new big Explorer class, whatever Enterprise for the G, and be called a Picard class. That's what I think it should have been done. And the Titan A could have carried on its adventures, because it's obviously had a storied history. If it's been given a suffix, not many starships get, at the time, not many got suffixes, but they're handing them out like bloody sweets these days, out there on Star Trek. I think Voyager even got one, didn't it? Which is fair enough. Anyway, but yeah, I don't like it. My headcanon says they just did this for this, Federation Day, Starfleet Day, whatever it were called. That celebration. It was a temporary thing in my mind. And it went back to being the Titan A. And we got a different Enterprise G. That's my headcanon. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And there's another Starship Enterprise that they haven't mentioned in this list, as well as the XCV-330. They've also forgot to mention the Enterprise J, the NCC 1701J, which, yes, I know it was from a possible future or an alternate future, but it's still there on screen in canon. So let's have a look at that one, shall we? There it is. The Enterprise J. This was seen in the series Star Trek Enterprise with Crewman Daniels, who was a time agent from the future, says, "You're on the Enterprise J to be exact, a distant relative of your ship. We're 400 years in the future, so they're in the 26th century." There we go. The USS Enterprise NCC 1701J was a 26th century Federation Universe-class starship operated by Starfleet in a possible future. And there's an image of it. Not the best-looking ship, to be honest. That was what we saw in the episode. There are some other renders that are a little bit better. It's a terrible design, and it's bloody awful. But it was really big, apparently. Really big, about a kilometre long. There's a better version of it. But it's not attractive, is it, compared to the other Enterprises? But anyway, there it is. So what do we know about it? We saw it within the Battle of Procyon 5, where the Federation were battling the Sphere Builders, who were a trans-dimensional race that had duped the Xindi to believing that Earth would destroy their homeworld. But the homeworld had already been destroyed, so it must have meant a different homeworld. But that's where we saw it, and so there we go. That's all we know about it, really, to be honest. But there we go. So as I said, this article forgot to mention the Enterprise J and the XCV330. So, digital fix, you're rubbish. Anyway, the adventures of the USS Enterprise look set to continue into the 25th century, with Captain 7 of 9 at the helm and Commander Raffi by her side. Should we ever get a Star Trek Legacy release date, we'll see what these adventures look like. Hopefully it'll happen. It's got to happen, hasn't it? And the continuing voyages of the USS Enterprise. The history and legacy of the USS Enterprise looks set to continue as long as there are new letters in the alphabet. And then, what will they do then? They'll go into the Greek alphabet. After the Enterprise Z, or Z, we'll have the Enterprise Alpha. I don't know, I'm just guessing. Or will they double them up? Will it be the AA? I don't know. But that's way into the future, isn't it? And then blah blah blah. Right, so there we go. So that's all the Enterprises, the Starship Enterprises, the ones that went into space for you, including the ones that they missed out on here, the Enterprise XCV330. There we go. It's odd, isn't it, that there were never a I forgot what class it's called. Is it Daedalus class? There was never a Daedalus class Enterprise, because that was supposedly a popular design, wasn't it? Before the between the NX-01 and the Constitution, in that time period, that in between, that 100 years between Enterprise and the original series, the Daedalus class ships went out, didn't they? With their, they didn't have a saucer section; they had a big round ball, didn't they? Which were like that version of the saucer section. It's odd that there were no Enterprise Daedalus class. But anyway, right, so there we are. We'll leave it there. I just thought I'd share that with you. So, thanks for watching, and wherever you are, look after each other, and until next time, I'll see thee.